Hi friends, this is your pal Scott Garibay, and today we are going to talk about I'm going to give you a field report for the second shop I went to on May 3rd, 2025, Free Comic Book Day. So I'm absolutely fascinated by for the subject of American comics free and Free Comic Book Day is a really awesome day. Who can complain about free comics? Also, the places around me have deals. They usually have deals when you come in, and so sometimes I take advantage of those deals, and I did do that today. So I'm going to give you the heads up. All right. So the second place I went for Free Comic Book Day was a friendly local comic shop that is in my area that I do not buy my comic from on Wednesday. And let's talk about why. So this is a great shop, and I actually have a friend who works there. And so there was a period this year where I was like, oh my gosh, my friend is working at this place. I should really start giving, and I really don't have any friends at my, at my friendly local comic shop, my primary one. They don't need my dollars. They're a very successful comic book shop, and they don't need my dollars, right? Like, certainly not the way this other shop does. They definitely need my dollars more. So why don't I give them my business? Hours. So my primary local comic shop is my primary local comic shop because they have longer hours. Why do they have longer hours? Because they're not just a comic book shop. They are a Warhammer shop. They are a tabletop role-playing game shop. They are a board game shop. And they are a comic shop, right? And they routinely stay open till 9 p.m. Monday through Thursday, actually Monday through Wednesday, okay? Then on Sundays, they're open from like 11 a.m., I think it's noon till 6, and maybe even 5. But on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturday nights, they rock it until like midnight, right? Like, and so that means, and on Wednesday night, when I go to get my comics, they're open until 9 p.m., right? Whereas that is not the case for, that is very much not the case for the comic shop that I go to. Yeah, that is very much not the case for the comic shop that I go to in, that my friend works at. They're like closed by like, I don't even know. That's the issue. I went like twice to buy comics from, but they were shut down both times. I was like, whatever. But so hours is a big deal. And also I will say, it is hard to have a comic book shop today. And so that other comic shop who has Warhammer, board games, tabletop role-playing games, just a lot of other options, they're much more diversified. And I think they're now what's really interesting though is, honestly, this other much smaller comic shop that only sells comic books, right? I think I think they should be in a precarious economic situation, but they're not. Listen to this. So they've been open for literally 50 years, right? So how has this secondary comic shop that I don't buy on, how have they stayed open? Well, that's kind of interesting, and I'll explain it. So they have stayed open. So first, it was owned by the father of a guy I went to high school who was literally in my grade, right? And so I was like, that's pretty cool, right? Like, and still I never bought from him then, because this other shop was just always had better options, had better hours, right? So it wasn't just a comic shop. So but that guy owned it for like at least 30 years, right? 30, actually, I think about 35 years. And about 15 years ago, he actually owned that thing for 15 years. And then what happened at that point was he owned the shop for 15 solid years, 35 years. And then 15 years ago, he just retired. He got old and he sold it, right? So who did he sell it to? And I thought this is pretty fascinating. So he sold it to this veteran who had been in one of the military services for quite a while and was getting close to the age of retirement, but still had, and he had retired from the military, but he wasn't that old because you can retire from the military after 20 years, right? So he came out with, a good nut, and like he's like, okay, I can buy the shop, and he did. So he bought the shop. He then had the shop for 10 years, and he was going strong and doing okay, but then he had to sell it because he got a knee replacement. Now, honestly, I don't know why that should have been the reason to sell it, because at that point with 10 years, he should have been able to have an employee by that time, I'm thinking, but he ended up selling it to a guy who came from California, who was from this area, and he had made a lot of money in California, and then he got divorced, and so he came home, right, with a lot of money, and then he bought the shop, and he's had it for the last 5. So one dude had it for 35 years, a veteran had it for 10 years, and now a divorced rich guy from California owns it, and he was only out there, because he met his wife and he moved there, and then that relationship went south, and now he's back home on the East Coast with a comic shop. There you go. That's and I only learned all that this year. I didn't even know the history of that, but because I knew this friend who worked at the shop, he gave me the down low, and so that's the whole story of that specific shop, right? So I went there today, and there are 30 books on Free Comic Book Day, and they are all saying the same rule: 10 comics. That's it. That's all you get. So if you go to Free Comic Book Day, if you want to get all the comics that are available on Free Comic Book, you have to go to at least 3 shops, right? Which is pretty wild. All right. So that is really something. You have to know, you have to go to three different. So I went and I got 10 more comics. Well, actually, I got Post Malone's Big Rig twice, right? So I did get a couple of comics the same at each place, right? But I still, even after going to 2 different shops, I'm still out and don't have everything I need, from Comic Book Day, which is kind of a bummer. And like wow, getting to free comics, it's awesome that there are that many free comics. But I do remember back in the day, you could just go and you could get all the comics you wanted, and you could go around the table and get one of everyone. Now, I do know why they're doing this, because people would come in and they would snatch up everything in the morning, right? And what's even more interesting is I was going through some of the back issues, and get this, there are certain comics every year that show up at Free Comic Book Day that end up being worth money, which is unbelievable. Like that a comic that would be free would actually be worth money. Now, this is absolutely not the case with everything, but it is definitely the case with some things. So that I thought that was very interesting. So I went to this other shop, and then when I was done, I actually, because I don't go to this shop this often, and this is the best possible day to buy there, I was like, okay, what do you got? What are your sales? And they're like, everything that's on the wall. So all the super high-end old, stuff, 50% off. That's a darn good sale, right? Everything that's on the recent new, 50% off. That's a fantastic sale, right? And then he said the Fat Jack stacks, those are $2 each. So what was interesting was Fat Jack's is another comic shop in my area, but I don't get it. It's not close to me, right? So this guy was given space in his place for Fat Jack stuff. So I think he was ringing up Fat Jack stuff and then giving Fat Jack half of that, or some cut, right? So these were comics in this shop from another shop, right? So I'm absolutely fascinated by all this, and I'm sharing it with you. And the reason why is there's a lot of things where I look at it and I'm like, I don't know how much longer this is going to happen, right? Because I will tell you right now, I don't think that comic shops are a good business model today. I love them, and I'm so happy they're open. But one thing that I think is really fascinating is my comic book collection is really funded, is really like, what do you call it when somebody supports you, right? It's subsidized. It's subsidized by these comic shop owners, right? Because I'm pretty sure, I don't think any of them are really making money. I'm not sure any of them are profitable anymore. And so when you have a comic shop, and that comic shop's been there for 20 or 30 years, right? And you need to sell it, it doesn't matter if it's profitable or not. And the reason why is you got 1,000 guys, and so all you need is just one rich guy, right? And not even a sucker, just one guy who wants that experience of owning the comic shop, and that's a pretty cool experience, right? And so a lot of these guys, so in my area, I'm not kidding, there's over 4 comic shops that are like 10-minute drive from me, right? So and actually all of them have been in business for quite a while. None of them are even that new, right? But they don't just keep getting owned by the same people. They bounce from group to group to group. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. The important part is when I get to hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider subscribing and have a fetched millennium.